was just telling you what the translation said. I did not say I believed it.
Well, I'm not worried. If you look hard enough, you'll find a Bajoran prophecy for just about anything. The ancient texts are a tangle of vague contradiction.
Well, this one is anything but vague, and Bajoran prophecies have an odd way of coming true.
Don't say you believe in this stuff, too.
What's up, Lore Masters? So as most of you know, fans have the ability to request customized breakdowns or analysis via Patreon, YouTube membership, or straight PayPal. I recently received a request from someone who told me they were giving this lore theory as a Christmas gift to themselves. Yeah, that's not going to make me feel some deep imposter syndrome right there. But hey, if this is your gift to yourself, I will attempt to make it worth it. Let's just get into it. Today we'll be theorizing what would have happened to Odo if he had experienced a Bajoran orb before meeting his people. After looking at the scant information we have on the orbs, the prophets, and the changelings, I figured that if he was going to endure something like this, and it was going to be meaningful, it would likely be the orb of prophecy and change. This tier of the prophet was arguably the most influential messenger of the wormhole aliens in the entire series. It would profoundly impact a Bajoran poet 3,000 years before the events of DS9, causing him to write about the prophets and the emissary. It would be the orb that Sisko used to better understand his visions and stop Bajor from joining the Federation, and it would even change a Mirror Universe character, one Burial Antos. The man was to steal it and take it back to the Mirror Universe, but after encountering it, he was changed. So what would have happened if Odo had had an experience with this very orb?
I'm Gul Dukat. We've met before.
Have we?
Yes, you've become quite the student of humanoid nature, haven't you?
Just what is it you need, Gul Dukat?
You're going to investigate it.
Me? Why me? I'm no investigator.
Ah, but I suspect you'd make a good one.
When considering how to write this theory, I think I'm going to write it as if I was an actual writer working for Ira Stephen Bear. Legacy Trek was often plagued with adorning specific races certain hats. That is to say that a race would ultimately embody one aspect or another. The Klingons are honorable, the Romulans are sneaky, etc., etc. This is something still seen even to a degree in Disco-era Trek, but it's not as pronounced. With that in mind, we do know that changelings were meant to be authoritarian. It's in their DNA. They want to rule people. We even see this aspect within Odo when the female changeling tempts him and he becomes quote-unquote aware of how insignificant everyone else is to him. Hell, we even see it in the episode Chimera when he is tempted by that random changeling that he finds, and probably killed with the Section 31 virus. That's another point we can talk about later. If I were going to write this and put it in the show, I would want it to fit within what we see happen. I really like Odo's arc, and I think this would have cemented it. When writing, I think there would be one of two ways that we could have taken it. Either Odo was originally going to be like the other changelings, but was profoundly changed by his experience, like we see happen to multiple others that use the orb, or he's just given the push that he needs to do what is right. For me, I like to think that Odo would have leaned towards authoritarianism, but there was something good in him. Again, if I was the one to put this on paper, he would have somehow gotten to the orb, opened it up, and would have been confused with the wormhole aliens. And the wormhole aliens would also be confused with his existence. This would have happened before even Sisko had met the wormhole aliens. It would have been before just the real carnage we see with the Bajoran occupation. What would be interesting is I think that both the wormhole aliens and Odo are a lot alike. They'd both want to be in control in one way or another. The ability of the wormhole aliens to see all points in time might even have them hint at Odo's origins while they're talking to him and ask him a simple question. Why? Why doesn't he try to rule over the Alpha Quadrant, the Bajorans, the Federation? Why doesn't he try to ultimately stop the Cardassians from doing what they're doing? Why isn't he like the others? Though they'd never tell him the others are the changelings, he'd still learn that on his own. I'd even imagine that they would show Odo two sides of history. They'd first show him the occupation and what was to come, and then a free Bajor, what it looked like under Starfleet. And then they'd probably try to have a discussion with him on why he would choose the occupation over Starfleet. Of course, Odo would have no idea what they're talking about, not knowing his ancestry or his people. Through them, he would learn what being a part of a brutal regime ultimately does to everyone. That it destroys the oppressed and even hurts the oppressors. He'd indirectly get an understanding and even an appreciation for what it is to live without being oppressed. On the flip side, I think the prophets would find him quite curious. Again, he's not like anything they've ever encountered. I could see them almost having more reverence for him. They might not think that the changelings are gods, but they could respect what the species wanted to do, even if it was done in more brutal ways than they preferred. While I don't think they'd ever look at them as equals, I think they would probably consider them a bit more high up on the chain. The prophets aren't the best people after all. After his experience, this would lead him to becoming the head of security on Terrak Nor under the Cardassians, an attempt to bring justice to chaos, and then staying on with Starfleet. Realizing the problems with totalitarianism, he'd work within the constraints of whatever system he's in to make it more fair. Which is what you would expect from someone who has a predilection to control people, but doesn't want to give in to it. Now, based on the emails going back and forth, I do know that the person was interested in the prophets talking to Odo before he connected with the female changeling.
Do you want me to stop?
Honestly, I don't think if Odo had had an experience at that specific time, like right before the female changeling walked in, that it would have had as much of an impact. I can't see it turning him more evil, and he's already well into his arc, so I don't think it would have made a lot of sense. He may have had more reservations than he initially did about not caring about others, but the female changeling, I'm just saying good booty will change even the most ardent person. It was also questioned what would have happened if the female changeling, or other changelings, were to have an orb experience. Personally, I think they would have been given the Kai Wynn treatment. The prophets probably aren't interested in interacting with them, though let's say that they did. I'd imagine that the wormhole aliens would again probe why they were so hostile and why they think that they themselves are gods. If a change was to happen, it would be an appeal to self-preservation, not empathy. They might show the female changeling what was going to happen if she tried to take over the Alpha Quadrant. This could change her mind. At that point in time, and even at the end of the Dominion War, I don't think the female changeling, nor any of the other changelings, were in a position to truly understand how empathy works, to stop being conquerors. I have stated it a few times, but I'll end it like this. Whether the prophets would call themselves gods or not, they acted like it. They also had very little care for those who were not them. They cared for Bajor in their way, but they weren't above letting Bajor go through whatever hardships it went through. I think they would either see changelings as equals or oddities that they could respect to a degree, looking at a people who aren't like the others yet wish to control everyone. They'd either pay them no mind or study them for research purposes. Ultimately, if the changelings left the prophets alone, the prophets would leave the changelings alone. Well, generally. If Space Jesus asks for a favor, all bets are off, but that's another discussion. I do think the changes of the orb would be profound, but it would have had to happen early in the story, but that's just my thoughts. It's my sincere hope that this was what was exactly requested, or at least sparked some interesting ideas. What do you guys think would have happened if Odo had had an orb experience? Or what if the female changeling had had one? Let me know in the comments below, and guys, have a Merry Christmas.